It's my tremendous pleasure to introduce Ashlie Bryant. She's the co-founder and president of Strands Global. I'm just going to say one thing. When Brian and Bob decided on the project that you're going to be hearing about this evening, they went to the FBI, and the FBI said, you need to get a hold of Ashlie Bryant. In 2011, Ms. Bryant was instrumental in creating and overseeing a human trafficking education program designed to educate students at the middle school, high school, and university levels. To date, Strands Break Free education program has educated more than 20,000 students. It's amazing. Bryant designed and implemented a research element to the education program in order to better understand the impact of the curriculum at the end of the program. And this past year, she developed a statewide education initiative called Protect in partnership with other nonprofits, the Office of the California Attorney General and the California Department of Education. In addition to overseeing the nonprofit and staff at Strands Global, Ms. Bryant, who also has children, her efforts include keynote speaking, collaborating with other anti-traffic organizations, developing corporate and governmental partnerships. She was telling us that she's going to be going to San Diego soon to talk to the TSA people down there. She's been part of a multi-coalition through California, including Sacramento Rescue and Restore Coalition and the Bay Area No Traffic Ahead Coalition. She's also worked closely with the San Diego County District Attorney's Office to have a better scope of the human trafficking problem in the state. Ashlie also sits on the San Quentin resolution by the California State Senate for her hard work and dedication to the fight against human trafficking. And in 2015, she was chosen to participate in Stanford's executive program for nonprofit leaders. There's more. She began her journey to combat human trafficking after she founded Run for Courage, which I'm going to be doing with my grandson. When a friend's 17-year-old daughter was taken from a grocery store in her sleepy Sacramento suburb, she was shocked and stunned that the crime of human trafficking occurred not only around the world, but also right in her own backyard. Inspired to take action, she and 3 friends founded Run for Courage, Inc., with the mission of raising awareness and funds to combat human trafficking in 2014. Run for Courage, Inc. became Break Free and merged with Strands Global. She brings extensive professional experience in marketing communications, public relations, relationship management to her normal role. And so prior to founding this organization, she held multiple executive marketing and communication positions in Silicon Valley. She holds a bachelor's degree in international relations and French, I didn't know that, from the University of California, Davis. In her spare time, do you have that? In spare time, she spends time with her husband of 25 years and her 4 children. It is my tremendous honor to introduce Ashlie Bryant to all of you.
Thank you, that was so kind. I really appreciate that. So I would love for you to repeat this word after me. I'll say it, and like 2 seconds later, I'd love it for you to say it. So the word is hope. Hope. And again, hope. Hope. So that's the word that, for me, really inspires me every single day, because the crime of human trafficking is heinous. It's awful. There are 2 parts to human trafficking, or 2 major parts that we look at when we think of this crime. One is sex trafficking and the other is labor trafficking. And when you think about the viciousness and what happens to our youth, it really is very heinous. But what balances it out is the work that we do at Strands Global. This all began for me in 2001. We were in China, my husband and my 4-year-old then son, and we were adopting our daughter, and there were 10 babies that we were holding in our baby Bjorn, and as we walked around, there was a woman who approached our group with probably an 8 or 9-year-old little girl. And in Chinese, she communicated to our guide, and I didn't have any idea what she was saying, except for that our guide was crying and visibly shaken. And so after I went up and I said, can I help you? And she said, no, Ashlie, just keep going and I'll talk to you later. So I circled back around with her later and she explained to me that a woman was trying to sell this young girl to our group. And she explained in her terms what human trafficking was, and so that was my first exposure, but that was over there. That was in China. And so for some reason in my mind, I thought, Thailand, Cambodia, China, that happens over there, and it's awful, and it's heinous, but it doesn't happen here in the United States. And then in 2008, my good friend's daughter went to a grocery store parking lot up here in the suburbs of Sacramento with her high school friends to hang out during spring break. And what they didn't know was that there was a trafficker who befriended that group of high schoolers. There were about 20 of them in the parking lot. And he worked the crowd, because what he was looking for, which we know now, is he was looking for who was most vulnerable in that crowd of kids. Whether it was female or male didn't really matter, but who was most vulnerable. And unfortunately, my friend's daughter was the most vulnerable one. So he put drugs in her soda when she wasn't looking, and then offered to take her and 2 of her friends home. He took the 2 friends home, but he didn't take my friend's daughter home. He passed by her house, and when she said, hey, you just passed my house, he said, no, I have other plans for you. And he opened the console of the car, and he pulled out a gun, and he pointed at her, and he said, if you ever run or you say anything to anyone, I'll kill you or your family. He took her back to his parents' house in the same town that she lived in, and he raped her there. And then he posted her for sale on Craigslist. And he sold her to a guerrilla pimp or a trafficker who's a violent trafficker in the Bay Area, in Fremont, California. And she was sold for 8 days, 15 to 20 times a day, to men who were seeking to have sex with minors. And she was sold online the whole time. So for her mom, and for all of us, as we were looking for her, thinking that she had been taken and that she maybe was murdered, I mean, there was all sorts of things that we thought as posters were being posted up. But when the FBI called and asked her mom, are you sitting down? And she said, no, I don't want to sit down. Is she alive? And they told her, yes, she's alive, but we need you to sit down. And so she didn't actually sit down. She was leaning up against the wall, and they said, have you ever heard of the term human trafficking? And she said no, and they proceeded to tell her what that meant. And then she dropped to the ground because she realized that her daughter had been sold many, many times in that week. So for us, that launched us into that we needed to raise the level of public awareness, because people just didn't know that this was happening. I didn't know this was happening in the United States. So we started this nonprofit, and as Ann talked about, we actually merged with 3 Strands and combined our work, and I'll talk a little bit about that this last year. But when we were having our races, we call the Break Free Run now, we started in Folsom, expanded to Oakland, and then expanded to San Diego. So part of the beauty of that expansion is that we've had the privilege of working all over the state of California, and actually beyond the state's borders in other states too. But this is just a modern day slavery is what we call human trafficking. The press often refers to it as modern day slavery. It's important for us that we think about our language around this. It's going to be that as we raise the level of public awareness, we'll think about our language. Like, for example, the word prostitute. That word, when we say it, or prostitution, implies that someone made a choice. Well, if you're 14 in the state of California, that's not a choice. If you're over 18, maybe that might be a choice, but as a minor, it's not a choice. So our language, instead of prostitution or prostitute, prostituted, someone who's been actually raped by someone who's seeking sex. So it's important for us to think about our language. There's no such thing as a child prostitute. Someone might refer to it as that teen prostitute or teen prostitution or child prostitution. There's no such thing. It's an oxymoron. So when we think about human trafficking, we think of modern day slavery, and we think of this is exactly what it describes, is that it involves the use of force, fraud, or coercion to obtain some type of labor or sex act. And we often refer to CSEC, which is commercially exploited or commercially sexually exploited children. That's something that you may hear in the news, and that, that you may hear around town too. These are some of the statistics that we know. People often ask, what is the data? Where are the statistics? For a second, if you think 20, 30 years back to the domestic violence movement, in the beginning of any movement, you really don't know all the data and all the statistics. And human trafficking wasn't a crime on the books in California until 2006. Pimping and pandering were, but not human trafficking. So this is just a 10-year-old law. So with that will come data. But if you look at these stats, most of them are global and or what we know in the United States. 21 million victims held in global slavery, that's both labor and sex. 50 states in the US all have incidents of human trafficking in 167 countries. 2 million children worldwide that are exploited, and 100,000 American kids. 100,000. So you were talking about the 49er Levi's Stadium, and my husband actually is considering not watching the 49er games either. He actually said that the other day. And he said to me, Ashley, you know, there's about 100,000 fans who watch those games. And I said, yeah, imagine 100,000 kids in that stadium all being trafficked. That's how much we have in the United States. It's one of those visuals. I'm a super visual person. Human trafficking is estimated at about $150 billion global industry, and in the US, $9.8 billion. That's the GDP of Costa Rica, folks, 9.8 billion. Human trafficking is the fastest growing criminal industry in the world, and the average age of a sex trafficking victim in the United States is between 11 and 14 years old. This is what we know as our Polaris project, who is, it's a nonprofit back in Washington, D.C., started the National Trafficking Hotline. Actually, it was graduate students from Brown University who started it, and Bradley happened to be at the Leaders Conference at Stanford that Anne spoke of in my biography, and we talked a lot about this heat map, and these are the incidences of human trafficking in the United States. So you see California is very lit up. The highest incidents in California are Los Angeles, San Francisco, and San Diego. But the whole state is definitely the #1 state of all the states in the United States. So let's talk a little bit about Three Strands and who we are at Three Strands Global. Our whole point of what we do at our mission is to employ and educate and engage. So we call it our 3 E's. And that really is all about empowering a community and doing it through these 3 initiatives. Our vision is a world free from human trafficking, and our why is because human trafficking is not okay. Today at the event we were at, I asked our staff to share with the group why they do what they do. And our director of development, she got up and she's new actually to our staff, and I loved her response. She said, you know, just because human trafficking is not okay, and we all can do something. Part of what I'll dive into now is specifically where we fall. When we started 6.5 years ago, part of the reason was because of what happened to my friend's daughter. But with the funds that we raised from that very first race and from events all the way through the last 6.5 years, we have a super collaborative nature. Part of that just comes from who we have been as founders. But what that meant was that the events that we had, that we would take some of the proceeds of those events and we would vet and have a grant that we would actually grant money back to those organizations that were restoring or recovering victims of human trafficking. So as you look at this circle, this is sort of where we live. So prevention is the education, which that's the program that we actually developed, and we have programs that we roll out to the whole state. That's called Protect. And then there's recovery and restoration. Those are the programs that we fund in a collaborative nature. And then the last is reintegration. And that reintegration, we have 2 projects right now locally in Sacramento that we work on. One is the Gila Project, which we work with Women's Empowerment. We had 36 young men and women who were just placed at the Golden One Center to work there. And so reintegration is helping those who are survivors or those who are at risk to have jobs. So that's the reintegration piece. The other thing we do is we work with partners like the Kings or Juma, or our partner in Cambodia who makes bracelets, and our partner in Nepal who makes bracelets for us too. Those are made by survivors. So this is sort of Three Strands Global and where we fit holistically in the cause circle. And then this dives a little bit deeper. This talks about education, engagement, and employment. You'll see Protect is our education. That's our 5th grade, 7th grade, 9th grade, and 11th grade program. And then Breakthrough Education will spin actually to corporations and groups that will actually be able to have that a different arm under education this next year. And then engagement are breakthrough runs and employment. I just talked about that here locally in Sacramento as well as abroad. So those are our E's, and I call that our spider. Kind of looks actually a little bit like a ladybug with long legs. That is a good visual since I'm a visual person. It always helps me. And this, again, we've been working for the last almost, 9 months with the Kings and Juma to get students and those who've been survivors and at risk placed in jobs. And they interviewed over 100 different students, and all 36 of our students were accepted, which is really, it's a really testament to our outreach manager, Sarah, who spent a lot of time with these kids, helping to coach them along as they went into the interview for the jobs at the Golden One Center, and the Gila Project, and then our bracelets in Haiti, Nepal, and Cambodia. I'll take just a minute. I'm going to pass this by because I'm going to go into greater depth on the next slide, because I want to be able to talk to you about what this is, the Protect Project. This Protect Project, over 3 years ago, one of my good friends is the Supervising Deputy Attorney General, and we have lunch once a month, and she said, Ashlie, we need to figure out a systematic, scalable approach to education. And you guys are doing a great job in the classroom, and all of your volunteers that you train and certify are doing great, but your great-great-grandchildren are going to be educating kids if you don't come up with a scalable and systematic model. So we brainstormed for a long time, and we came up with Protect, Prevention Organized to Teach Children on Trafficking. And we started that project a year ago, actually a little over a year ago, in conjunction with, in partnership with the Office of the Attorney General and the Department of Education. So it's been a great privilege to be able to spend time working alongside the CDE and the Office of the Attorney General to be able to get Protect where it rolls out this fall. So we're actually going to be rolling out September 15th. We'll be in Sierra County, really educating the county level, and that's what the upside down triangle is. The teal kind of color is that we go in and educate the county to make sure that county providers all understand what human trafficking is. In counties like Sacramento, we understand what human trafficking is, but in Sierra, they might not have the same depth of knowledge that we do, or another county. So we want to make sure that everybody's on the same page from a protocol as to what do you do if you actually identify a victim of human trafficking, or someone identifies themselves as a victim of human trafficking. And then the next layer down is the education team. Today I was actually recording for 2.5 hours that narrative that goes to the teachers. So they can download that curriculum, and they can watch me teach the 9th grade curriculum, and both visually as well as have the narratives in paper form, so they can refer back to that as they teach the students in the classroom. Again, this is the scalable piece, so that we aren't doing it, but the teachers are doing it themselves. And that piece of it actually is super important, because when we leave, we leave. But the teachers are there day in and day out. I'm a daughter of a 35-year veteran of education, and an uncle who's 50 years in education, and an aunt who was just as long. And I know the importance of kids to my mom and to her siblings, and I know the importance of them looking at their students and being able to see if they would be vulnerable or if they'd be trafficked. So the education team is next, and then the education team delivers that to their students. Along the side, you see metrics and protocols. That has to do with research. Anne talked about that we implemented a long time ago, 5 years ago, this research pre and post testing the students to see if our curriculum was actually making an impact. The great news is we got tons of successful stories. But now we actually are partnering with the University of California at Sac State, and we actually are with the Institute for Social Research, and making it so all of the schools will have the surveys so that we can actually have real data alongside of this education project. So this is an important piece of what we are doing, and to be able to engage students and make it so that we can prevent this from happening in the first place. Wisconsin spends $395 a day on a victim of human trafficking, and in California we don't even have a number, but I'm sure it's more than that. So if we can stop that from happening, then we will save our counties and our children years and years of trauma that is not that we don't want them to have to experience. And the last E that we talk about is engagement, and that is just to engage people like yourselves. We all can do something. In that very first walk run that we had 7 years ago, I'll never forget my friend standing on stage with her daughter and her saying, you know what, I'm so encouraged that some of you are here to walk or run or even crawl. And there was one man, he's been there all 7 years. He last year was 94. And he always comes across that finish line with his beret on and saying, Ashlie, I've just finished another race. So we all can do something, even if it's to walk a 3K or if it's to help with the Protect Project. There's some way to engage. Oops, I keep going to the wrong thing. This is the flyer for the Break Free Run, which is September 24th. So I talk about the opportunity to collaborate and engage with Strands Global to combat this crime, because trafficking is not okay, and we know that all of us can do something. And then this is what we call our tipping point. It goes back to that core value of ours called collaboration. As the Strands Global community builds, so do prevention and education efforts, reintegration of survivors and at-risk youth into jobs, and that growth expands awareness, education, and employment as resource opportunities. So that's it. So I thank you so much.
They're good friends and very, very happy to have. I'm not going to go into it long about who he is and all of that he does and all that he gives, because I want him to have enough time to speak.
Can you hear me? Okay. I know you have to be out here in 15 minutes, so we'll try to go through what we had to say today really very quickly. About a year ago, Brian Gladden and I got together, and I got together with Brian Gladden because Brian is, to me, one of the most creative people in Rotary that I know. You know, you talk about people who think outside the box. Well, the box is over there, and Brian's over here. Brian thinks totally out of the box and comes up with one of the most wonderful ideas that I have ever heard. Anyway, we started talking about something that I'm foundation chair, and my job is to get money from people, get more money for our Rotary International Foundation. We're 100th year now. We need to be doing something with a big splash, we think. But one of the things most people say is, you know, I don't give to the foundation because I want to give to my local community. I want my money to stay in my local community. So Brian and I started talking about what can we do to come up with something big that Rotary can do and keep it in our local community. Well, the biggest thing Rotary can do is a global grant. Well, you know, your club does global grants. You do blood grants in India or Asia or South America or wherever you might be doing your grants. But you do grants predominantly because there are rules for Rotary International that says 30% of the cash in any Rotary project has to come from a Rotary club or district outside of the country where that project is. So if we were to try to do a global grant in our district, 30% of the cash has to come from India or Japan or some other place. So the United States, quite frankly, it has the money. And that's why we do our projects outside of the United States. Fast forward real quick. I went to a peace forum in Ontario, California last January. And I happened to be sitting next to a gentleman, his name was Basil Baz. Basil Baz was an ex-CIA agent. And we sat at dinner for about an hour and a half, and I listened to him tell story after story after story. And what he said, but one story really resonated with me. That story was, he happened to be in Libya. And he and his associate were over there. They found two young ladies. These young ladies were not Libyans. They were Americans. They had been taken from their home in the United States and were being trafficked in Libya. Well, they got these two young ladies out of Libya and brought them home. And when he retired from the CIA, he started his own agency. The his own 501c3, and what he and his special ops friends do is they go and get people out of situations. Well, I came back from this event, and I started talking to Brian, and I said, Brian, I got what I want to do, but I don't know anything about it. And Brian said, well, I don't know anything about it. I don't know human trafficking. I said, let's come up with something we can do that, number one, we can do in our own backyard. Number two, we can do it with Rotary Foundation money. And number three, we can do it with a splash. Then our clubs, number one, will be proud, but we can use it as a way to get new members. I'd like to bring up now Brian Gladden, this person who does not, he's not even close to the box when he thinks, and let him tell you about where we're going with this.
Okay, so where we're at now, you got you on a little journey here. You found out today where Bob and I come from, what sex trafficking is, why it's important, that it does happen in Sacramento, how traumatic it is, what's kind of being done about it, and how limited the data is. Then you hear Bob talk about, okay, let's do something as Rotary and through a grant. So the last 6 months, literally every day, we've been trying to get educated, fast track this, and not something that's 2 or 3 years down the road, but now, we want to do something now. So we have met with all the nonprofits in this region that are the who's who of nonprofits in human trafficking, and actually being at the top of that list. There are over 50 nonprofits that focus on human trafficking just in the Sacramento region, which is, we had no idea. So there are a lot of people focused on certain pieces of this from the start to the finish. As you heard Ashlie talk, and I'm going to try and summarize a lot of this, the data is just not there. So when I first came into this, I said, okay, let's figure out for messaging back to the foreign end when we go to our contacts overseas. They want to know how many girls from Bangladesh are trafficked in Sacramento and what's their age group and how blah, blah, blah. None of that exists. We're just scratching the surface of this stuff. So the data about is Sacramento at the top, or is how much is being done in this region versus that region, sex versus labor, barely have any of that data. What we do know is that it's thousands of kids, tens of thousands in the US, not 100,000s, and in California there's tens of thousands. It's billions of dollars of industry. And so we said, all right, let's figure out who's doing what in the Sacramento region, what do they do, who they do it with, and then what are the gaps that Rotary could potentially fill. And to get this Rotary grant, we're looking at the maximum, which is $200,000, which means we need to have 200 here and 100 from what I call the B end, or the A end. So that's $500,000 minimum what we're looking for. After we met with all these nonprofits, it was clear for people like Weave, 3 Strands, My Sister's House, Opening Doors, Stand Up Placer, go on and on, the who's who, you probably know a lot of these folks, FBI, DA, and so on. There was 2 areas that every single one of them said, these are the things that we need help with. And the first one is education, which is exactly what Ashlie addresses. But education from a bigger perspective. So not just educating the kids, which is what Ashley's program does, but then you have, what about education for public awareness? What about education for healthcare workers and law enforcement, what to look for? What about education from a technology tools perspective? Mobile apps, web portals, contact centers, tools online to look for, what to look for or who to call. So education at a higher level is more than just the Protect program, but this is a huge start. So we identified, talking to all these folks, okay, education touches on the prevention side. And I break it down on the prevention side from a supply and demand side. So if we can help stop demand at some point, we're helping with the prevention side. And really there's there's two ways to stop the demand or shrink the demand. One is you do public awareness and you educate everybody from the kids to the public that it's not a victimless crime, there's a face to it, that it does exist in your backyard, what to look for. And now you're getting people that might be participating in these things not knowingly. Massage parlors, hospitality, agriculture, we're talking sex and labor. And you think, wow, okay, maybe that's going on and we didn't even know what's going on. And then the second is the punishment side to shrink the demand. So now you have the Johns and the pimps, which we won't touch that side yet, we'll leave that to regulators. But on the education side, we can help. The other side of the thing that we found out was an assessment center. So in the back, you asked about on the back end, after you rescue somebody, what can be done. As of now, and Sacramento actually is one of the leading counties. We've been educated over the last 6 months. San Diego and Alameda are probably the leading counties in California on fighting and doing something about trafficking. Sacramento now is right there, and probably escalating and ramping up even faster with people like Ashlie and the group that we met downtown today, the DA Paul Durenberger, Michelle from CPS, probation. It's amazing folks. But there's nowhere to take somebody. If I'm a law enforcement officer and I rescue a 13-year-old girl today, I have to take her to juvenile hall. That is the place to take someone to get them into a safe environment and to get assessed to figure out what their needs are. Mental, physical, how do you get them home? If you want them to go home, maybe that's a bad environment. Juvenile hall is not the right place. It's safe because there's bars there and you can, keep them there, but that is still a traumatic place, right? You have criminals and juveniles that have done bad things there, not that are victims. So they all said, we need a place to take a girl, especially girls, because 90% of them are girls. That's a warm environment, that is safe, that is not institutionalized and industrial like a metal toilet in a jail cell and cold water only in a metal bed. That's not what you're looking for. But that has services there, physical and mental needs, so nurses, doctors, that has all the different nonprofits that might be able to come and help them. Also has a tie-in to the Justice Center if they need to do something legally and press charges and do all that, and as well as CPS, so they can get them back to the family if the family is a good unit to go back to. So we heard all of this, and then we said, okay, let's do both. We got to start the demand side, and we got to try and help on the trauma side. So originally it was one grant. About 2 months ago, we said we got to break this into 2 grants, because a physical building, as we all know, takes a long time to figure out how to build one or retrofit one. So as of next month, we're going to try and start writing this grant for the education piece. And then throughout the rest of the year, by the end of the year, our goal is to write a grant for the assessment center piece. So 2 grants, $500,000 each minimum is our goal. The stars have aligned. I think there's higher powers that work on this. As we keep talking to folks, there's more and more folks that keep coming to us saying, we want to help, or we're already doing something, let's do it together. So when we talk to the DA and probation, Mike Shores, who's a county probation, he's in charge of all kids for county, Sacramento, which obviously is the largest county with the most kids. He already put in a proposal to the county to retrofit one of their defunct centers called the Morgan Center, which is what we want to use, to ask for $800,000 to fix that back up, to use it for CPS and for girls who are sex trafficked. And then we started talking to him and we said, let's do a public-private partnership. And then CPS and the DA said, this is awesome, let's keep working on this. And then we met with Dignity Health. So now Dignity Health is involved, and they want to do something as well. So we're all moving in the same direction, and there's now a physical building there that we want to use for this assessment center that is right around the corner from juvenile hall. So a much safer place and environment. You probably won't see a lot of pimps and johns out there trying to get the 14-year-old girls back, because you've literally got hundreds of law enforcement there. The Family Justice Center, we just met with Faith Whitmore and Jan Scully, ex-DA, who've created this, which is now the legal process to engage all the people that need to be engaged. So they would actually come to the center when someone was brought there as a girl for a safe environment if need be. So all these folks said, yes, let's do it. Rotary, we're kind of the glue that's hurting all the cats, the relationships, the funding. And the win-win for the foreign ends, I call them our being partners, is you would now tell your Rotary Club overseas in Guatemala, whoever you've worked with, what's in it for you? Well, first of all, whatever we do here, we'll give to you. Forklift it, mirror it, put it in your local community. It's the exact same issue. So now we have a global issue that doesn't matter where you are in the world, it's all the same. Foreign-born, US-born, the issues are the same. So you could educate people there. You could also look at doing the assessment center. And then the second message is, now you've got reciprocity. You could do your own global grant as you normally do, and the Fair Oaks Rotary Club or the Roseville Club could help you on your grant after we get this going. Where are we at now? What do we need from you guys? So we're starting to fine-tune what these 2 grants look like. We are trying to get Rotarians on the assessment center in parallel with the county in case they don't get their funding or it takes too long. We want to retrofit this Morgan Alternative Center with or without the county, and they're all for that, to get it to where it needs to be as a warm environment. And to do that, we need Rotarians who are experts in construction, landscaping, engineering, you name it, right, that you would do to retrofit a building like this. And we want them involved with the county architectural services who we're having a meeting set up with the next few weeks. And we already have the blueprints of the building to find out what exactly needs to be done. That we could probably do it at a fraction of the cost, at people's cost, Rotarians donating time and labor versus putting an RFP on the street that somebody wants to make millions of dollars at. So that's number one. Number two is we want you on the committee in case you are passionate, you want to be involved. Bob and I can't do it all, so now we have people like Lucy who've been involved, and Ann, and many others. And the other piece is the education piece. So we're going to start writing the grant. We would love more help in there on that side as well. That will be the first thing to roll out. So we want to vet out some of the things we already are looking at now. Is a campaign that Ashlie mentioned called The Ugly Truth. It is a public awareness campaign in San Diego. No reason for us to recreate the wheel. If it's already been successful and the DAs and the states and everybody else have said it's great, all right, let's use that. So we're getting costing for that. Ashlie, actually, the part she didn't tell you is it's about $25 per kid to do the education in a school. Doesn't matter if it's 5th, 7th, 9th, or 11th grade. They had Cisco Systems donate at almost cost the learning management systems, for that's how the teachers teach in the classrooms. But to roll it out to every county is $25 a kid. So now the superintendent, the school budget, they have to buy off on that, or somebody has to augment that with donations. So we've listed all the counties in Area 5180, how many kids are in 5th, 7th, 9th, and 11th grade, and what that would cost. So now in our grant, we've got to kind of prioritize. That county first is the biggest, then where do we go? And how much money do we have? How long will it take? It could take years, but at least we have a sustainable plan. So we want the Rotary clubs involved, we want you guys to be involved. The bigger, the better, and it's just really now who's who. You're talking to someone and all of a sudden you've got 5 people that say, I want to help, and I've got a construction company, or I know this nonprofit, or I know this foundation.